Get out of here. There's no food. Converted man here. Okay, so we've got this daily disciple guy made a video. It's really short, so this will only take me an hour to respond to.
Do not have any evidence that God exists. So why do you still believe that this narcissistic, egotistical does exist? It makes no sense to me personally.
Hey friend, I want to answer your question, but I really think there's more going on underneath the surface. It sounds to me like there's a lot of bitterness and anger in your heart against a God that you don't think exists.
Okay, so of course the little clip that he played isn't the full clip, and what's really weird is he didn't put the OV in the description at all. That's usually that's usually what you do. So I could have looked up where you found that. For all I know, it's a friend of yours doing that. I don't know. But you're off to the wrong start here. You can think something doesn't exist, but also recognize that thing as being good, bad, or other. So Jar Jar Binks doesn't exist. I think we would both agree upon that. But Jar Jar Binks is a moron, even though he doesn't exist. So the same can be true for your God. What you should have said to the guy is, if you're going to respond to the last statement he made, is he said, that doesn't make sense to me. I would have said, appeal to personal incredulity. Just because it doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean it's false. But that would have required logic, so,
This isn't uncommon. I hear atheists all the time go on and on about their lack of a belief in God, and yet they're trying to convince us that he's some kind of moral monster. But think about it.
Well, depending on which God you're talking about, there maybe that is the wrong way to go about it, but the God of the Bible at any rate is a moral monster, and that you can't see that is kind of sad, but also not really surprising given the cognitive dissonance. So God has 613 laws laid out by it in the Bible, and every single one of those laws winds up in somebody getting stoned to death if they don't follow the law. I don't view that as morally good. Maybe you can find some apologetic excuse of why it was appropriate for the time or whatever. You can weasel your way out of it. But that basically means you're saying, well, no, it is wrong. Unless you're willing to say that it's absolutely morally right to stone people to death for wearing mixed fabrics, which is one of the laws. You say, well, but Jesus got rid of those laws. But that doesn't matter. You still had this time in history where people were punished for doing certain things. That's not even to mention that everyone that didn't believe in God, because they didn't know that this particular God was the true God, what's happening with them? I'm sure you have some apologetic for that to cover that. It's like, well, they're judged under different standards or whatever. Then Jesus comes along. Okay, so the people during Jesus's time that didn't know Jesus was the Son of God or whatever, and they didn't believe, or they had questions and they died. Did they go to hell, or were they punished, or did they have a different criteria for judgment? And then you still have people today that don't believe because they haven't heard about Jesus or for other reasons, and they're getting punished for that disbelief as well. I don't consider that character to be morally virtuous. It is a character that is in the story. The way the story is written is this character punishes people for not believing in it. And maybe you can come up with some retcons to explain away the punishment and justify it or whatever. But all that is just justification for immoral acts, in my view. Now, maybe you view it as morally righteous to punish somebody forever and all time because they didn't believe in your particular God, but I view that as morally repugnant.
it. The fact that you have a conscience, a clear sense of right and wrong, that you're even appealing to in your accusations against God, it means that you're not actually living consistently with your own worldview. Let me explain. You see, from an
But atheism is not a worldview. That's something that some apologists and theists still get wrong, is thinking that atheism is a worldview. No, it's not. It could be part of one, but it is in and of itself not one. Nor is skepticism or agnosticism. And technically, I think that you could even say theism really isn't a worldview in and of itself. You might say that it helps you formulate a worldview, but by itself, no.
an atheistic evolutionary worldview, we are all simply stardust bumping into stardust. We are evolved animals, and so we can observe in how organisms are, but we can't say how organisms should live. You can't draw any absolute morality from that worldview. But here's the
Wow, that was incoherent. Yeah, we are stardust, and we have evolved throughout time, and we are creatures that have done all that. And yes, and that in and of itself, if to try to say, well, you can't get morals from that, it's just really silly. That's apples to oranges. The two are different things. Like, where I come from, my origins, is separate from ethics. Ethics is a system of thought that you come up with to guide your moral principles, and there's several different ethical systems: virtue ethics, utilitarian ethics, and of course the ethics that you probably have to go by, which would be divine command theory. So there's other ethical systems beyond those, but for now, those are the ethical systems, and you don't need, except for DCT, you don't need a god for the other ethical systems. So there isn't a problem in having ethics under any other worldview. But of course, that would ruin your straw man argument, so please continue.
the thing, friend. You don't live that way. You know there is right and wrong. In the Bible, it says that God has given us a conscience and he has written his law on our hearts. Not only that,
Yeah, well, the Bible says many things, and some of them are actually right, but not very many. Here's the thing: if God supposedly wrote these morals on our heart, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, then why do people do bad things? Oh, because they can ignore what's written on their hearts. Why? But then you still have to teach people what's right and wrong. But why would that be the case? If it's written on your heart, you would never need to teach kids what is right and what is wrong. They would just know it. But they don't. The kid goes towards the hot stove. And you're like, well, gonna let them get burned a little bit just to let them, teach them a lesson or whatever. Maybe you go over, no, it's hot. And you go, look, here, this is hot. And maybe you put their hand under some warm water, go, see, hot. That oven, very hot. And maybe you could teach them that way, because that's a little less severe than letting them get burnt on the hot stove. Just an idea, So there's ways, but you say, well, that's not morals. Okay, and it's like, they learn morals from observation. It's not pre-programmed in. So this is just not true. If it was true, you wouldn't have to teach kids right and wrong. Like, don't throw the stones at the kid. What are you doing throwing rocks at each other? Rocks are hard and they'll hurt you. Don't do that. Oh, well, I didn't know. I was just, they were here and I was throwing them and they were throwing them. We thought it was great fun. And yeah, it's fun until you get hit with one. But that apparently wasn't written on their hearts. And so which morals are written on their hearts then? And couldn't you demonstrably prove that rather than just assert it? And if it was something that you could prove, then you'd have to also explain why people don't necessarily follow them, which I guess you could just say is sin. But then what's the point in writing any of the morals on their heart if they're going to disobey them anyways? In fact, why give them 613 commandments if it's not written on their hearts? Why give them the 10 commandments? Why give them any commandments at all? Maybe it's not actually written in their hearts, and that part of the Bible is wrong. Just an idea.
that, but that we know he exists, but we simply suppress that truth in our unrighteousness, in our sin.
This good old thing. You know that this is true, but you just repress it. What? No, this is ridiculously silly. There's a couple of places in the Bible that talk about this. So Paul, who I don't care about because, as far as I can tell, Paul's just is the first lying apologist. He just made up a story about seeing Jesus so that he could get some power and prestige, right? And he wrote, "Oh, everyone knows there's a God," or whatever. And there's some other place that says something like that too, but it's not true. People believe in different gods. People don't believe in God at all, and they have no idea of even the God concept. So you just go, all you can say is, no, but that's not true, but that's not true. How about demonstrably demonstrating that it's true? So now, so-called truth machines, lie detectors, aren't very accurate and aren't very scientific. And there are better machines that do that out there now, and they're developing them and whatnot. So get the best one that you could, and sit a number of atheists down and have them say, "I don't believe in God." And if the machine is functioning decently enough to and maybe we can figure out how to make sure that they're not tricking the machine or whatever, we come to some sort of conclusion from that? Well, yeah, we could. And I would suspect that the machine would say that the atheists were not lying about that they really don't believe in God. You could then just move the goalpost back and say, well, the machine can't detect it because it's so buried deep inside of them. But why are they able to do that? It makes no sense. And why would it be that I personally am unaware of it? And how does that help me? It's like, well, you just don't believe because you're unrighteous. Like, I don't even believe. No, I'm not unrighteous. I'm righteous, but I'm not righteous according to this thing. I'm righteous according to my own standards. Well, that's not God's standards. How do you know? Because it's in this book, and you could make the same claim for any other God. So it's an empty, completely holy non-claim. You have no evidence for it. To demonstrate that it's true without moving the goalpost, which you would if you went and you tested it and you got a bunch of atheists together and you actually got a bunch of theists together and you had some something a little bit more sophisticated than the typical lie detector. But if we use that, okay, it's not very great, but it's better than nothing, I guess. And we would demonstrate that the atheist actually doesn't believe in God, and maybe we'd see a few theists that actually don't believe in God, even though they say they do. Maybe that's the case. But you would not be allowed to move the goalpost. If you would agree to do that test, we could set it up, and we could even put some money on the line and bet on the outcome or something. And I guarantee, after it was all said and done, there would be a video where you do the same thing anyways. You would just pretend that it hadn't happened. You would ignore the results because the results would prove that your Bible is wrong, at least in that part. So why you can't even bother to do that test? Well, because it might show you that you're wrong.
Sin. God has revealed himself to us so evidently in creation. Just step outside your room and you can see his handiwork at play. At the end of the day, I don't think I'm going to convince you to believe in God simply by having the perfect argument. I believe it's God who transforms our hearts and opens our eyes to see him. He is the one that can pull off the blinders of sin to see him clearly. I'm praying that you encounter Christ's transforming work in your life today. Follow for more.
So you didn't even attempt an argument. I mean, forget about a perfect argument. Well, that would be a valid and sound one, and you didn't even attempt one. You can pray all you want. It's not going to change anything. That's been demonstrably demonstrated through several prayer studies. If you read through a meta study on prayer, you'll see how ineffective it really is. I would even go further and say we could get, everyone in the world to all pray for the same thing, like pray for a single thing, a rock to levitate, and have it be inside of a glass, casing. And it wouldn't budge. Wouldn't happen. So, I just, we never see them demonstrably demonstrate that their claims are true. The best they can do is cut someone short from whatever argument they were attempting to make, not link the original video, and go off on their own little tangent and then claim a moral high ground by saying, well, you can't get morals from your worldview. You don't even know what the guy's worldview is because you cut it off. And that's assuming he even told you what his worldview is. You assumed his worldview for him. You didn't bother asking him. Ugh. Anyway, so he doesn't have any evidence for God in this video. Morals wouldn't prove God. Even if you could demonstrably demonstrate that morals are objective, that wouldn't prove God. And nobody has demonstrably demonstrated that morals are objective, at least not in the sense that they keep saying that they are. So, okay, that's it. Not much else to say here. Just same old, same old. Hopefully somebody else will come along with an actual argument that I can pick apart with its logic. And until then, lobsters exist and stay skeptical.